My house became a battlefield on September 11th, 2001. And for 22 years, I lived as a soldier at war against an entire religion. My name is David Harrison. I'm 52 years old. I'm American. And I carried so much hatred in my chest that I almost killed 275 innocent people at 35,000 feet altitude. Today, I need to tell how a 19-year-old Muslim boy taught me that God works through the people we despise the most, and how my prejudice almost prevented the greatest miracle of my life. Before continuing with my testimony, write in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know which countries this account of mine is reaching. When the Twin Towers fell, I lost 3 of my best firefighter friends on the same day. Danny Sullivan, who had been my best man at my wedding. Michael Thompson, who played poker with me every Friday. And Carlos Martinez, who was saving people on the 70th floor when the second building collapsed. In one morning, my world crumbled along with those buildings. But what began as legitimate grief transformed into something much darker. Every piece of news about terrorism fed a growing rage inside me. Every image of a bearded man or a woman in hijab on television awakened a fury I couldn't control. My wife Rebecca tried to calm me, but I would explode. They killed my friends. They're all the same. The arguments at home became daily. My children, then young, began to fear me when I screamed at the television. Rebecca even considered divorce. But what I didn't know was that God was preparing a lesson that would break me completely through the person I would despise the most. For years, every Muslim I saw became my personal enemy. At the supermarket, in traffic, at the airport where I worked, I would stare at them with hostility, make malicious comments, avoid any contact. There was something rotten growing inside me that I couldn't control, like a cancer of the soul that was consuming me from within. I left the army in 2005 and transitioned to civil aviation. I thought flying would give me peace, that being in the heights would bring me closer to God. What bitter irony. I was soon assigned to international routes, especially Asia-Pacific. This meant regularly dealing with Muslim passengers. Every flight was silent torture. I would watch Muslim families boarding the plane, and my stomach would turn. When they made their discreet prayers during the flight, I felt an irrational anger rising in my throat. I made sarcastic comments to the crew, complained about the special procedures they supposedly required. My colleagues began to notice my hostility. Captain Williams called me several times for conversations about tolerance and professionalism. I would nod my head, but inside I remained at war, until in 2018 I was assigned to the Kuala Lumpur to Los Angeles route. I didn't know I was being sent to the battlefield where my life would change forever. It was on a humid March morning when I first saw Omar Hassan, a thin boy, 19 years old with a shy smile and always impeccable uniforms. He worked as a maintenance technician at Kuala Lumpur Airport, but there was something about him that irritated me deeply from our first encounter. Maybe it was the way he stopped 5 times a day to pray even during the most urgent work, or how he treated everyone with a kindness I interpreted as fakeness. These Muslims are all actors, I thought. They pretend to be nice, but inside, and I would leave the thought hanging full of venom. That boy awakened a rage in me that I didn't even understand myself. When he approached the cockpit to do routine inspections, I would tense up, respond with monosyllables, avoid looking into his eyes. My colleagues said he was the best technician at the airport, that he knew the Boeing 777 like no one else. But I only saw a potential terrorist in disguise. If I had known that my life would depend on those hands I despised so much, if I could have imagined that God was preparing an angel through that person I considered my enemy. For 2 years, I flew the KLLAX route 3 times a month, and on every flight, Omar did the pre-flight checks with a meticulousness that irritated me. "This kid takes too long," I complained. "He stops to pray in the middle of work, delays takeoff." I didn't understand that this delay was exceptional technical competence, that those prayers asked for divine protection, not only for him, but for all of us. That the attention to detail I interpreted as Muslim showmanship saved lives every day. On one occasion, Omar found a microscopic crack in a turbine that the computers hadn't detected. The flight was canceled, costing the company thousands of dollars. I was furious. This boy is making up problems. 3 days later, we learned that a plane of the same model suffered catastrophic engine failure from exactly the same problem. Omar had saved 300 lives, but my pride prevented me from acknowledging it. Every flight was a silent battle I waged with myself. I saw Omar working with dedication, treating the crew with respect, helping other newer technicians, but I filtered everything through my prejudice. It's all an act, I thought. He's waiting for the right opportunity. God was weaving something I would never imagine, but my spiritual blindness prevented me from seeing. It was October 15th, 2023. I wake up at 5 a.m. with a strange pain in my chest. Rebecca asks if I'm okay. I answer, it's just fatigue. Real men don't get sick, I think to myself. What fatal arrogance. I arrive at Kuala Lumpur Airport at 7 a.m. for the 10 a.m. flight. Malaysia Airlines 275, KLLEX, 275 passengers on board. I see Omar doing the pre-flight checks with even more care than usual. Here comes his little show, I mutter to co-pilot James Chin. Today, this kid will delay us more than usual. But Omar wasn't putting on a show. Later I discovered he had dreamed of a terrible storm the night before. He had prayed intensely asking for wisdom to protect all passengers. Those slow checks were his heart interceding for our lives, but I only saw it as a nuisance. The chest pain increases during the pre-flight briefing, but I ignore it. Omar approaches with a detailed report on adverse weather conditions along the route. Captain Harrison, there's severe storm formation over the Pacific, he says respectfully. Perhaps we should consider an alternative route. I explode with rage. Boy, who's the pilot here? You take care of your maintenance. I take care of the flight. Omar lowers his head, murmurs sorry sir, and walks away. I didn't know he was saving us once again. And my pride was literally killing me. The 10:15 takeoff is perfect. Blue sky, favorable wind, excellent visibility. See, I tell James. That boy wanted to scare us for nothing. But 2 hours later, we encounter exactly the storm Omar had predicted. Massive storm cells emerge from nowhere like black walls rising from the ocean. The weather radar flashes red in all directions. James becomes tense. David, this wasn't in the weather briefing. The pain in my chest intensifies, but I continue piloting with stubbornness. That's when I see Omar in the cabin. By regulation, he had remained on board to monitor some new electronic equipment during the first flight. After maintenance, he approaches respectfully. Captain, I know these Pacific storms well. May I suggest a different altitude? My response is loaded with contempt. Boy, go back to your corner and let the adults work. Omar retreats in silence, but I see in his eyes a deep sadness, not for being humiliated, but for seeing that my pride was putting lives at risk. Something supernatural was moving in those dark clouds. The plane begins to be shaken violently. The passengers become frightened. The pain in my chest becomes unbearable. But I refuse help. What happened next made me question everything about God, about faith, about what it really means to serve others. At 2:30 p.m., over the Pacific Ocean, my world literally collapses. The chest pain explodes like a bomb. My left arm goes numb, and I collapse over the controls. Massive heart attack. James screams desperately, David. David, respond. But even semi-conscious, even feeling death approaching, when I see Omar running to take the controls, my prejudice still fights against reality. No, don't let him, I manage to whisper. He's Muslim. James is in total panic. He has only 200 flight hours, has never been through a real emergency. The plane is in freefall. Passengers are screaming. Oxygen masks are deployed. And I, who should be protecting 275 lives, was still trying to prevent our only salvation because of my blind hatred. Omar kneels beside me, checks my pulse, administers first aid. Captain Harrison, you're going to be fine. I'll take care of the plane and all of us. His voice is calm, firm, without resentment. That boy I had humiliated for 2 years was literally saving my life. My hatred for Muslims was literally killing 275 innocent people. But when Omar took the controls with the precision of a veteran pilot, when I saw his steady hands stabilizing the falling plane, I understood I was witnessing a miracle. A miracle operated by the hands I despised most in the world. The flight attendant's announcement spreads panic in the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, due to a medical emergency with the captain, the flight is being conducted by Mr. Omar, aircraft technician with flight certification. Chaos is immediate. A Muslim is piloting, screams an American passenger. We're going to die. He's going to blow us up. Other passengers stand up, try to invade the cabin, demand that James take control, but James is paralyzed by fear, unable to make any decision. Through my semi-conscious state, I hear Omar on the intercom. His voice is serene, comforting. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Omar Hassan. I am a certified Boeing 777 aircraft technician and licensed pilot in training. Please remain calm and in your seats. Trust in Allah and our technical preparation. We will arrive safely. But this only increases the panic. He's speaking Arabic. He's invoking terrorists. People cry, pray, despair. I see everything through a fog, but one thing remains crystal clear. While passengers enter hysteria through prejudice, Omar maintains absolute calm, reciting Quran verses that ask for protection and wisdom. I saw something at that moment that changed my understanding of true faith. It wasn't the performative faith I practiced on Sundays, full of judgments and hatred. It was operational faith that works under extreme pressure, that serves others even when rejected, that honors God through competent service to others. The storm intensifies. Lightning cuts through the sky. 200-kilometer-per-hour winds shake the plane like a leaf. Omar needs to execute a maneuver that I myself, with 25 years of experience, would consider impossible. Descend through the storm to find more stable air. That's when something happens that marks me forever. Omar activates autopilot for 30 seconds, turns east, direction of Mecca, and makes a quick but intense prayer. I saw his hands rise, his lips move in silent supplication. Tears flow down his young face. He stopped to pray, screamed the passengers. We're going to die because of his religion. But I, who was watching closely, saw something else. I saw a young man asking God for supernatural wisdom to save the lives of people who hated him. I saw faith in action, not words, but power. When Omar resumed the controls, there was a supernatural serenity in his movements. His hands moved with millimetric precision. His eyes calculated trajectories that defied logic. He wasn't just piloting that plane. He was being guided by a greater force. The descent through the storm lasted eternal 12 minutes. Extreme turbulence, lightning striking the wings, instruments failing. But Omar maintained course with surgical precision, as if he could see through the black clouds. At that moment, I understood it wasn't just technical skill saving us. It was divine intervention operated through that young Muslim. At 3:45 p.m., we emerged from the storm over Los Angeles. But our ordeal wasn't over. The landing gear had been damaged by lightning. Fuel was at the limit, and the airport was partially closed due to the same storm we faced. Omar has two options: attempt an emergency landing at LAX with compromised landing gear, or divert to Ontario with insufficient fuel. Any veteran pilot would hesitate. But Omar, at 19 years old, makes the decision with wisdom that transcends his age. LAX Tower, Malaysia 275 requesting emergency landing on runway 25 left. We have incapacitated captain, damaged landing gear, and 275 souls on board. His voice is firm, professional. The tower responds, Malaysia 275 approved. All emergency services are positioned. What happened in the next 8 minutes defies any technical explanation. Omar executed an approach that I myself, even healthy, wouldn't have the courage to attempt. Perfect speed, exact angle, compensating extreme crosswind. The plane touched the runway like a feather, slid exactly on the center line, and stopped 200 meters from the end of the runway. Absolute silence for 3 seconds. Then the cabin explodes in applause and tears. Passengers who minutes before wanted to lynch him now kneel to thank him. Flight attendants cry with relief. And I, still on the paramedic stretcher, feel my heart broken. Not from the physical illness, but from spiritual shame. In the hospital, while doctors care for my physical heart, God operates on my spiritual heart. Omar comes to visit me on the second day. He arrives shyly with flowers and a prayer written in Arabic and English. Captain Harrison, he says softly, I hope you're recovering well. I brought a prayer asking for complete healing for you. I can't hold back the tears. That boy I had humiliated, despised, and almost killed through prejudice was praying for my healing. Omar, my voice fails. I owe you an apology that words cannot express. And I owe you my life and the lives of 274 innocent people. He shakes his head. You owe me nothing, Captain. Allah used these hands to serve his creatures. It was a privilege. That genuine humility breaks me completely. How can you forgive me? How can you not have hatred for someone who treated you so badly? Omar smiles with a peace I've never seen anywhere. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught that we should return good for evil. You were wounded inside. Wounded people wound people, but Allah heals all wounds. At that moment, my stone heart fell apart. For 22 years, I carried hatred that corroded my soul, destroyed my relationships, and almost killed hundreds of innocents. But a 19-year-old Muslim boy taught me about forgiveness, about true faith, about how God works through people we least expect. A week later, still in the hospital, I give my first interview to CNN. I publicly confess my prejudice, ask forgiveness from the Muslim community, and tell how Omar saved our lives. The reporter asks, Captain Harrison, did this change your perspective on Islam? It changed my perspective on everything, I respond. I considered myself Christian, but I carried hatred in my heart. Omar is Muslim and demonstrated God's love in action. He taught me that true faith isn't in the words we speak, but in the service we render to others, especially those who mistreat us. The video goes viral. I receive thousands of messages, some supportive, others from angry Christians for me defending terrorists. But the ones that touch me most come from Muslims worldwide, thanking me for publicly recognizing that prejudice was wrong. Omar becomes an international celebrity. Job offers pour in from airlines worldwide, but he remains humble. I just did my job. Allah deserves all the honor. He decides to accept a position at Malaysian Airlines as the youngest co-pilot in the company's history. After being discharged from the hospital, Omar invites me to dinner at his house in Kuala Lumpur. I meet his family, kind parents who work in a fabric store, student sisters who dream of being doctors, an ordinary, hard-working, loving family. During dinner, his father tells me, Omar always dreamed of being a pilot, but we didn't have money for training. He's been working as a technician to save money for 3 years. Every ringgit he saves goes toward night flight lessons. My heart breaks again. That boy worked 12 hours a day maintaining planes, then studied piloting at night, all while supporting his family. And I saw him as lazy, as a threat, as an enemy. Omar, I say during dessert, I want to make a proposal. My company has a scholarship program for promising pilots. I'll sponsor your complete training. His eyes fill with tears. Captain Harrison, I can't accept. You've already done too much for me. No, I mean you've done too much for me. For all of us. It's the least way to repay. His mother cries. His father hugs me. That night, I understand that God was restoring not only my health but my humanity. Today, 5 years later, Omar is a captain with Malaysian Airlines. We fly together whenever possible. He as commander, I as co-pilot. The dynamic has reversed, and I couldn't be prouder. Rebecca says I'm a completely different man. The hatred that poisoned our house for 2 decades has been replaced by genuine love. My children, now adults, respect me again. I attend a mosque monthly for interfaith dialogues, something I never would have imagined. But the deepest change is spiritual. My Christian faith was superficial, full of judgments, and exclusive. Through a young Muslim, I learned how Jesus really lived, serving others, loving enemies, sacrificing himself for those who rejected him. Omar taught me that Allah and God are different names for the same Heavenly Father who loves all his creatures. That true faith manifests in competent and loving service to others. That miracles happen when we put others' needs above our prejudices. My prejudice almost cost 275 innocent lives. Omar's faith saved them all, including my soul, poisoned by hatred. The hatred that controlled my house for 22 years died in that cockpit at 35,000 feet altitude. Today, I know that God works through people of all religions, colors, and cultures. How many blessings do we lose through our prejudices? How many miracles do we reject through our spiritual blindness? How many disguised angels do we push away through our religious arrogance? If you've made it this far, it's because God wants to use this story to touch your heart. Maybe you carry prejudices like I carried. Maybe you have religious, racial, or cultural hatred corroding your soul. Or maybe you know someone like this. Share this video in your groups and social networks. Someone needs to know that God's love has no religious boundaries, that He uses people we least expect to teach us about true faith, and that it's never too late to ask forgiveness and start over. The battlefield in my house became an altar of reconciliation. And all because a 19-year-old Muslim boy showed me how God really works in the world through competent hands, humble hearts, and faith that expresses itself in sacrificial service to others. Share this story. The world needs to know that miracles still happen when we let love conquer hatred.